Vamos dar então início ao terceiro e último painel, é o painel da integração, a forma como os automóveis interagem e se ligam com as pessoas e as infraestruturas. Olha, por exemplo, no mês passado, o carro de um senhor interagiu com a traseira do meu Nissan Leaf e eu só não me liguei mais com o senhor porque tinha o meu filho no carro, porque senão tinha-lhe dado cabo da infraestrutura toda. Foi só mais ou menos para perceberem como é que isto funciona. Mas adiante, para dar o mote a este painel, vamos ter o senhor Ponz Pandikuthira. Ele é Global Head of Product Marketing and Electric Vehicle Operations, assim como Head of Motorsports da Nissan Motor. Pelo número de cargos, parece-me estar bastante à vontade para responder a qualquer pergunta sobre a empresa. Deste painel fazem também parte Frank Oldfield, ele é Energy Services and Integration Manager da Nissan Motor Great Britain. E temos também Conor Maher-McWilliams, Head of Flexibility da Kaluza, do grupo Ovo, e Paula Bermonte, Head of Innovation da Eletricidade dos Açores. Começamos então por ouvir o Sr. Ponz Pandikuthira. Olá Ponz, muito bom dia e bem-vindo a Lisboa, se é que se pode dizer assim, apesar de estar tão longe.
Good evening or good afternoon everyone. Good afternoon from Tokyo, happy to be here.
Here.
Does the sound okay?
Yeah, the sound is okay, Ponz. We read you loud and clear.
Perfect. Good to be here. Happy to be here visit you from Tokyo.
So what do you have for us?
Okay, let me get started. The third pillar, so we talked about intelligent power, intelligent drive. My colleagues there from Nissan Europe have given you the overview. And the third pillar of intelligent mobility is what we call intelligent integration, how a vehicle actually integrates into the environment around it. Now, in a short time, it cannot be a comprehensive deep dive into the topic, but what I'd like to do is present a few different ideas and give the audience food for thought to take this debate further. Let me see if this slide works. Perfect. So just some brief background to show my personal transformation in terms of my understanding of what integration really means. So I lived in Switzerland for 8 years. I was the head of product for Nissan, based in the headquarters in Switzerland. And this was my garage. You know, I had a family car with a 3.7 liter V6. I had 2 motorcycles, ridiculously overpowered, a very fun GTR to drive for personal use, and then a drive to work car with the 370Z. I typically did, combined with all these vehicles, about 40,000 kilometers per year. And obviously my bills for insurance, fuel, and maintenance were super high. Now I moved to Tokyo in November 2019. And for the first time in 25 years, when I landed here, I didn't have a company car, or sometimes it's typically I have 2 company cars waiting for the household to use. And they said, no, it's going to take some time, but don't worry, you won't need a car. I was first quite shocked, but for 2 months, I had no cars whatsoever. I bought an electric bicycle, which I took around everywhere to get around the city. And I used an app, basically with Google Maps tells you how to get around the entire city. The connectivity is incredible. And I had downloaded an app that pays for the subway seamlessly. So I just flash my mobile phone, proximity sensor wise, and I can use any train ride. I used my feet a lot more. I was easily doing 10,000 plus steps every day, walking around, extremely safe, a lot of protection from rain or even when it's too hot. So it's very easy to walk around the city. And on a rare occasion, I would actually use a taxi. And for trips in between cities, I would use the high-speed Shinkansen. So Tokyo to Kyoto, for example, absolutely beautiful city to visit. It's 2 hours by the high-speed train, but about 5.5 hours by car. And if you get stuck in a traffic jam, that could be 7 hours. So the question I ask myself is, how can I make such a big transition so quickly after 25 years of conditioned behavior of owning vehicles? It's really because of how integrated this entire mobility system is in Japan. Tokyo is 14 million people. The greater Tokyo metropolitan is 38 million people. And the way they move people around the city is absolutely impressive. So starting with that, one of the questions when I tell the story, people say, well, it's not really a fair comparison. You're comparing Rolle, Switzerland, you know, it's in between Geneva and Lausanne, kind of a rural area, long distances, to a highly dense city like Tokyo. And that's a fair point. You know, they're not equivalent in comparison. But the cities of the future are going to look a lot more like Tokyo. The mega cities and giga cities the world over, the way they're developing, there'll be large urban spaces. They will house a dense population, and the way of getting around them will not be with 3 cars and 2 motorcycles. It'll be a different integrated system of transportation. So coming back to intelligent mobility. So my colleagues covered intelligent power, intelligent driving. Let me just go back one. Okay, my colleagues covered intelligent power and intelligent driving. So intelligent power should get us to zero tailpipe emissions through electrification and various pathways to electrification. The autonomous driving technology, safety driving technology will make vehicles incrementally safer to the point where they actually drive themselves and we can remove the driver from the equation. Now, more importantly, once you have zero emissions and vehicles that can drive by themselves, they will still need to be integrated into the city around them. And that's with a very high level of connectivity where cars know where other cars are connected to infrastructure, and they're very efficiently being moved across the city. That picture that you see on the bottom right, it's a US suburban area. It was a residential area designed around personal vehicle ownership. The footprint is very large, energy efficiency is very poor, and obviously it creates a massive congestion when all of those people from the suburbs come into the city. That will not be the future design of cities. It will be a much more designed around use of what will be efficient for the large population rather than designed around the use of the personal car. Now, the cities of the future, they will be asking themselves very fundamental questions. And those of you there in Lisbon's an old city. The picture I've shown here is that of Rome. It will not be able to grow. It's a city designed in an era before the passenger car. And it's really reached its limits. It's now to the point where unless you get vehicles out of the city center, you will not be able to make it a thriving, well-functioning city. They start by putting one-ways everywhere, and then they have car-free zones. And eventually, city centers of these older cities, as they reinvent themselves, will start to become vehicle-free. And then we'll have to have a different paradigm of integrating passenger vehicles to get people from one place to the other into these cities. Now, on the top right, you see a picture that's actually a gridlock in Hanoi. It's an emerging city in Asia, rapidly growing population, economically making huge progress. A large number of two-wheelers, they take a smaller footprint than a passenger car. They're more efficient, though the pollution rates are very high, and they've still reached gridlock. They're following the same model of a passenger vehicle type infrastructure built to get people around the city. But the modern cities of the future, or the cities of the future, will be significantly more sustainable. In terms of congestion, pollution, air quality, etc., they will look more like the picture you see in the bottom left there. And that will require a different mobility solution. It's not just about making cars zero emissions. It's not about making them autonomous. It's a different mobility solution to get people around from one place to the other. Now, on the bottom right, you see it's just a schematic of what can be done with road spaces. We have immense amount of money that's been committed already into road spaces. They can't just be left to waste, but they can easily be repurposed for a different type of mobility. And here's just one sketch of what they could possibly look like. So the cities of the future, they'll be focused on how do we accommodate very large populations coming in? How can we make the cities sustainable? How can we improve air quality? How can we make them more business friendly? How can we have top-notch connectivity? And how do we improve quality of life to attract the best kinds of people into our city instead of some other city? And with those priorities, then what they do with the cities themselves and how they integrate vehicles into those cities will look very different. Okay, now I can't really predict the future of how this entire transportation ecosystem will look like, but there are a few problems. I'd like to just connect again a few dots here and then give people food for thought. One thing we do know is vehicles are extremely expensive to buy. They're expensive to insure, fuel, maintain, park. And worst of all, they're used about 5 to 10% of the time. And they spend a lot of time just sitting parked, and they depreciate very heavily in just the first 3 years of ownership. And I'll talk about parking here in a subsequent slide. So people's attitudes towards vehicles are changing very rapidly. If you look at that chart on the right here, Americans who are by far the most obsessed with single vehicle ownership and having your own passenger cars. There's a distinct trend year on year at different age groups. So the different bar charts are 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 20 to 24-year-olds, and then 35 to 39-year-olds. The percentage of people getting their licenses is dropping, and it's dropping very steeply in the younger population. They've started to realize that they don't want to spend a large part of their money on transportation. They'd rather do it spend it on different things that keep them connected to their friends and the people they work with. And it's not a passenger car even to show status. That used to be a thing in the past, and it's rapidly changing. Now, in stark contrast, look at the number of Uber drivers. There's 3 million Uber drivers now worldwide, 2 million Lyft drivers, mostly in the US. 6.7 billion Uber rides were given in calendar year 19. I used 19 just so not to use the dip we had because of COVID last year. And 88 million Lyft rides. So people's attitudes towards taking shared on-demand transportation has changed dramatically in just the last 5 years, and it's only the beginning. That's going to be a massive trend going forward. In that bottom left box there, if you look at a country like India, which has massive population, again, rapidly growing up in economic terms, 57% of the people prefer ride-hailing over a personal car. So these are people who can afford a personal car, potentially with a driver, but they prefer the convenience of ride-hailing. This is January 2020 data. Now, ride-hailing use has been growing in India about 30% a year for the last 3 years. And 74% of Indian millennials prefer app-based ride-hailing over traditional taxis. It's just because of the user experience. So no really single technology will fit this, it's not one size fits all, but we will have to think at an ecosystems level of the kinds of solutions we want to bring in. And we should start with these rapidly evolving customer needs, because that customer is certainly not static. Okay, so how can we do a few things to decrease marginal costs and improve the marginal utility of vehicles that we currently have? So, and these are just a few ideas to get us started. Marginal cost, for example, peer-to-peer sharing is in its infant stages. It still hasn't taken off at the rate, for example, that Airbnb was peer-to-peer sharing for housing, for example, and that just rapidly took off. But there are very interesting models that are making big traction in pockets of the world. Shared ownership of a personal vehicle is also taking off. There's a lot of people who actually buy a vehicle and they rent it out to a ride-hailing driver. This is actually a small business opportunity in many countries where Uber is very successful. And then on the top right, you see some things that are being done about day and night use. This is a trend I expect to see really ramp up as we get more electrified, autonomous and semi-autonomous vehicles, that a city could designate all commercial traffic and deliveries to be done only at night. Big trucks that haul cargo on the highway, they will be very easy to make semi-autonomous to autonomous, and they could run for much longer time. Those could be done only at night, free up the highways for congestion during the daytime. And all of this will be highly enabled by autonomous tech. And I think even in the next 5 years, we will be surprised at the kinds of changes we see in this area. Once again, we just need to think in terms of user experience and an end-to-end customer journey. How can that be optimized? How can the congestion be reduced? Congestion also means reduction in pollution and improvement in air quality. So I talked earlier about parking. So some staggering figures here. The US, for example, has 1 billion parking spots. That's 4 times the number of cars on the road in the US. So 50 to 60% roughly of urban real estate, very valuable real estate, is taken up with parking. And many different startups are trying to optimize how that parking is going to look like. How can you make it more efficient? So the picture you see on the right is a parking garage that's very common in Japan. This has existed for a long time actually in Japan. Hundreds of cars parked in a relatively small space. You drive into a parking bay in a busy city center, and it takes anywhere between 30 and 45 seconds. You hand your car over, and it gets whisked away in an elevator and gets stored until you need to come back. And when you come back to retrieve it, it's anywhere between 2 to 4 minutes, depending on how big the structure is. So think about having these kinds of parking structures outside of major cities in the world, where those who have private vehicles will have to store them there, but transportation inside the city will only be via shuttles, autonomous, semi-autonomous shuttles, obviously zero emission, making the flow of traffic through cities significantly better than it is today. I'd like to talk a little bit also about micromobility. Micromobility is going through phase 2. Phase 1 was where these e-scooters were dumped on major cities, and now cities have really stepped in to get involved in the process. They've regulated these partnerships, and they're working with select few companies. And all of these e-scooters are now being connected. The big problem was tracking these vehicles, making sure that they were left in the right place, locking, unlocking them. 5G connectivity has changed the rate at which that can be done. And so this is going to be a booming, absolutely booming field. In the US, it's going to be typically between a $200 and $300 billion industry, Europe 100 to 150, and China $30 to $50 billion industry. So it's going to be, you're going to see a lot of innovative solutions coming in micromobility. And a quick point on the efficiency of these things. These were at one point really children's toys, right? These kick scooters that became electric. But from an energy efficiency standpoint, they increase the speed of someone getting from point A to point B very significantly over walking. Makes it very convenient if you're carrying small things with you. So from an energy efficiency perspective, with 1 kilowatt hour used as the benchmark, an SUV, a gas SUV will only do 3 laps around a football field. An electric car will do 17 laps, but an e-scooter will do 333 laps. So the efficiency and the cost, reducing the cost of getting from one place to the other, micromobility is certainly going to be a big part of the equation going forward. Now, the third dimension, using the air, all of these solutions we talked about are on the road only and on the ground. Urban air mobility is also in its very early stages, but poised for some explosive growth. I actually sit on an advisory board for Airbus, advising their executive committee on the future of mobility and how to connect air mobility with transport mobility. And they have some fascinating plans for the future. So what you see on the top right is an Airbus E-Vtol, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. So it's basically drone style. It just takes off vertically. It's very quiet compared to a helicopter. It'll have passenger capacity to 4 to 6 passengers for short hops within an urban area. So think driving a ride-hailing or personal vehicle up to a certain spot, take the elevator up to the top of the building. They have a pad like this, and that gives you connectivity from the middle of the city to the airport or to any other hub, a train station, for example. So it's very quiet. It'll be very efficient, and the focus is actually on making this very affordable. Now, I have an example actually of something that actually works right now. For those of you who have ever been to Monaco, there's a helicopter link between between Monte Carlo and the Nice airport. Now, it's a helicopter, so it's still very loud, etc., but it takes 7 minutes. And the cost is about 130 euros right now per person, which isn't cheap by any means. But when you need to get someplace really quickly, I'll give you an example. We were sponsoring the Infinity Red Bull Formula One racing team. So I was attending the Formula One event in Monaco. We were sitting on a platform by the pits, which is built right on the water. So when the race got done, those of you who have been to that, trying to get out of Monaco to the Nice airport is between 2 and 3 hours. And in less than probably about 18 minutes, I was at the airport. So first we took a boat. We took a boat to a to a certain parking area, and a van took us for about a 5-minute drive to the helipad. We jumped into this helicopter, and 7 minutes we're in Monaco at the Nice airport. So yes, this is an extreme thing. There's a very exclusive number of people who can do this sort of thing, but this will become much more mainstream and affordable, where people will be using quick air vertical lifts like this to get across large cities. Think Tokyo again for the width of a city. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make with this slide is we will have in the future access to multiple modes of mobility, but they will need to be integrated end to end. So part of your trip might be done on a ride-hailing EV by Uber. You might do one part of a trip on an e-scooter. You might actually walk to one part of your leg. You might take a tram, and you might take an E-Vtol for some part of the leg. Now, if any one of these players will not control the entire ecosystem of mobility, and there's many companies trying to do that, but I think it's going to be quite inefficient. The key is going to be each of these modes seamlessly handing off their users from one mode to the other, allowing open API-style interconnectivity so each of these modes can connect with the other mode, and then the customer makes the choice of which one they'd like to pick. And I think this level of integration is certainly something that we're going to see in the future. Now, a quick discussion on existing infrastructure that's actually very valuable, takes up a lot of space. People have invested a lot of money in infrastructure like this. Think of the fuel stations. They're large. They're very well lit. A lot of money has been invested in maybe a convenience store attached to it. Charging stations are booming. They're setting up all over the place. And old parking garages, I mean, those are like eyesores. They're also in very, very key locations in the middle of the city. And last but not the least, car dealerships. We have them located in all major metropolitan areas, trying to give access to our customers to come and buy or service a vehicle. Now, these places will look really very different in the future. First, they have valuable real estate, too valuable just to be used for idle parking, too valuable to be used just to sell something. And the fuel stations and the charging stations will develop into, beyond just charging stations, a logistics hub, if you will, for all things urban mobility. So if you ever think it's going to be difficult to redesign the city of Lisbon, the city of Paris to accommodate a new type of mobility, think about all of these antiquated spaces that really are not efficient use of space and aren't servicing customers to get from one point to the other very efficiently. So these are prime candidates for redevelopment and integration into the urban mobility models of the future. Now, this is second to last slide. This discussion would be incomplete without a talk about renewable energy and batteries. And I believe I have some colleagues here on this panel who will have much more expertise on batteries. We're certainly moving to an era where we will have much more of our energy will be coming from sustainable sources. And I think Portugal is already on the leading edge of getting a large amount of your energy from sustainable sources. So let's say it's solar, let's say it's geothermal. This energy is not always produced when it's needed or where it's needed. So batteries are going to serve a very important role in actually transferring, storing, and moving this energy around from one place to the other. So battery technology is not just for in-vehicle electric batteries, it's also batteries for storage at home or storage in large industrial arenas, for example. That's a picture of the Amsterdam arena, where Nissan has used a combination of new and used car batteries, electric batteries, to provide the entire backup power for this arena. And the arena has solar panels all the way on its roof, so it's collecting this energy, it stores them in batteries. If the power ever goes down, or if they want to switch off the grid and use the backup power, they have a very seamless, sustainable source of energy. This is going to become much, much more mainstream, and I think we're going to start seeing this in housing and industrial offices on a pretty large scale. Last but certainly not the least, all of this integration that we've talked about is going to need a high level of connectivity. That connectivity will be fueled by 5G chips, and the propagation of vast propagation of 5G networks across the world. And when you have all that connectivity and all of this data being generated at such a massive rate, this massive amount of data will actually power the AI modules, the AI calculations, the AI projections, if you will, to vastly improve the service that people currently get. And this is really big data at its finest, because the amount of data, the complexity of the data that's being generated, especially if it's nicely aggregated and they're interconnected. So what I talked about earlier, the handoffs from one mode to the other, the amount of data that this is going to produce is going to be extremely valuable, and that data will actually increase the efficiency of the service for the end customer. So while data is the new oil, unlike oil, it's not a limited resource, and the more data you produce, it's a virtuous cycle, because the more efficient the system gets, the more data you produce, and so on. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be open for some questions or discussion at this point.
Muito obrigado, Ponz. Essas questões irão ser colocadas no final deste painel, depois de todas as apresentações feitas. Já percebemos que Portugal vai pagar o preço por ter mais de 500 anos de história nesta renovação de infraestruturas, mas vamos chegar lá, vamos conseguir chegar lá. Passo a palavra então para Frank Oldfield. Ele é Energy Services and Integration Manager da Nissan Motor Great Britain. Hello, Frank. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Frank. Go ahead.
Okay, so I can see clearly. That's great. I've just got a few short minutes before I introduce you to my colleague at OVO Energy, who will be able to impart some very interesting project statistics that we've been getting up to in the UK. But I have a few slides first I'd like to take you through. Okay. So there are many commentators out there that say we will never reach our decarbonisation targets without renewable energy. So solar and wind, obviously the two larger components there. And the only way we can easily or more easily allow the connection of that intermittent energy onto our electricity grids is with the support of batteries, be it static batteries, as was discussed earlier in buildings, or the batteries in our EVs. And, if you consider the increase in grid energy demand when we have a large fleet of EVs, so there are statistics at the moment for the UK that say by 2030 there will be an increased peak demand of some 30% on the electricity grid. So either we offset the cost of that improvement to the grid by using batteries, or we see the grid be improved and modernized at a cost to all of us. So using the vehicle batteries seems to me a really good way of trying to offset cost and to improve the financials of owning electric vehicles. Now, there's a report from Warwick University that suggests that vehicle to grid, or vehicle to X, vehicle to everything, or vehicle to H, vehicle to home, using a battery for vehicle to grid can enhance the health of the battery. Now, through this work they've done, they're suggesting that you might see a 9% improvement in the battery life. And with that becomes an improved value in used cars and for leasing products for the residual value, which then translates to cheaper monthly payments on your 3 or 4 year program. So that would be one very good reason to go V2G. The other one, of course, is that if we connect our vehicle to the grid, then we can generate an income. And that income can offset, we believe, to the order of magnitude of 8,000 to 10,000 miles a year, or £300 to £400, or €300 to €400 a year today. And that would be a very compelling reason for perhaps someone to migrate from ICE to EV more quickly, or for both the family cars to be EV rather than one EV and one ICE. Okay. So we've got a number of projects in the UK. They are all bar one funded or part funded by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, by a government office that focuses on zero emission vehicles, and by the Innovation Department, Innovate UK. And these projects have been funded for the last 3 years, to the tune of maybe a 50% grant funding or 70% grant funding, depending on the size of the organisations. At Nissan, we've got the privilege of being involved with all of them. And as I said, my colleague Conor will be following my few short slides to talk to you about the OVO Kaluza program. But within this bag of programs, we have commercial and public sector activity, looking at back-to-base fleets. We have residential programs where we're looking at leasing tied to energy supply with the Octopus program as well as OVO, looking at the development of agnostic aggregation platforms to allow for the trading and the charging and discharging of power. And most of these conclude this year and next year, and from which we obviously look to find many findings and promote change in policy. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the one that I'm involved in mostly at the moment, which is called E-Future. This is with E.ON, who are a number 2 or top 3 utility in the UK today. And we are also working with 2 dominant universities, Newcastle and Imperial College London, and with the two grid owners and the National Grid, alongside our government funders. And we are approaching the public sector but because many of these organizations have made climate declarations where they want to be carbon neutral by 2035. We are approaching blue lights, so police and ambulance and many police forces are looking at V2G for their crime scene vehicles, not their patrol vehicles. The National Health, who have a very high demand in energy, this is a natural opportunity for them. And as you would also expect, we have, can you see? Slides have gone a bit strange there. We lost the slides? Okay. Okay, back one. Okay. And the last mile delivery, which is your DPDs, for example, and Amazon delivery vehicles, although Amazon are not part of this program. So we're generating a lot of interest. They see this as a sustainable opportunity for their businesses to decarbonize their fleets. And you will see over the next few months announcements as many of these organizations contract and have their equipment installed. But the program outputs should be interesting. Obviously, we're working with E.ON to develop the charging and discharging platforms and control systems. We are researching and interviewing participants to understand the impact on brand loyalty and whether there's continuity of behavior. Do customers get bored of connecting their vehicle every day? And the evidence is that they don't get bored because there's a monetary reward or a corporate instruction for them to carry on. Then with Newcastle University, we're looking at cybersecurity and the data aspects of a vehicle-to-grid program. And with Imperial, we are looking at the distribution network impact, which has already culminated in a white paper, the Drive Towards a Low-Carbon Future, which we published in January, and of course is open to any of the viewers and delegates here today if they want to contact us after the event. But that was done with E.ON, with Imperial, and there's some very interesting findings from that. Okay, so what do we hope to see in the next 18 months in the UK? Well, we need to have a grid revenue stack, as we call it, that will provide optimally £700 to £1,200 per year per charger. This means that we can share equitably the revenues between the owner and operator of the vehicle, the OEM, Nissan, that sells the vehicle, and the grid aggregator and grid. And that's going to be key to being able to offer a nationally available program, and it needs to be able to work around the real life issues of the grid, where some parts of the grid are more constrained and therefore vehicle to grid would be more valuable, to less inhabited areas where there's perhaps lots of wind on the west coast of Scotland, where vehicle to grid may not be so valuable in the immediate area, but we have to find a way of levelling those offers. The other area we're looking at is how we subsidise, incentivise manufacturing so we can get down the price curve as quickly as possible, because today V2G chargers are more expensive than smart chargers. In order of magnitude, a charger will be €3,500 to €5,500. For an equivalent 7 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt charger, we need to get to maybe €1,500 or pounds sterling. At that point, when you add in the annual revenue stream forecast at, say, £300 for the end user, you have a very compelling story, incentivizing EV take-up and obviously helping with the decarbonisation and the transmission or the move to zero carbon. And then I think the final point in terms of policy is that in the UK we have many different district network owners, and they have slightly differing policies. And when you're trying to install and sell a product into a customer, there can be different periods of time, 3 to 6 months, when it might take a customer to get an approval for a connection, making it more difficult to connect the installation of their charger with the arrival of their EV, and also just effectively building cost into the installation model, when obviously we want to minimize the cost for customers. So those are sort of some key policy themes that we're working with our friends in government to try and optimize for large-scale take-up of V2G. And my last slide are just 3 statistics that I've pulled out of our white paper. These numbers relate to where we will be, hopefully, in the UK within this decade. The first figure is a £410 million saving per year in offset costs for the grid if we have 1 million vehicles on the road. And those savings can be obviously transferred through to the end customer, all the better. By allowing also a much greater volume of renewable energy onto the grid, we're obviously decarbonising that power to the grid and to the vehicles. So it's very possible that companies running V2G fleets will be running fleets with a negative carbon footprint. And my final statistic, with 50,000 EVs on the road in the UK, the net benefit to the grid of each of those vehicles per annum is calculated at £12,000. Clearly that reduces the more EVs come on board. But the potential, if we get it right, is absolutely massive. So everybody should seriously consider the opportunities of V2G, V2H, V2X. That's my final slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I think we're going to move directly to Conor, exactly as you said. Conor Maher-McWilliams, Head of Flexibility da Kaluza, do Grupo Ovo. Hello, Conor. So what do you have to tell us? I don't think we're listening to you. Is the sound of Conor going live, or is just a problem in the studio? Alguém me sabe responder? Nobody's listening to Conor? Can you test your micro, if it's open? Because we're not listening to you. And ok, o Conor vai tentar resolver este pequeno problema técnico. Acho que ele mandou a emissão abaixo para tentar reiniciar a emissão e ver se entra em direto connosco com som, que não estávamos a conseguir ouvi-lo, para fazer a sua apresentação sobre a Kaluza do Grupo Ovo. E já temos aqui o título, pelo menos. Free Miles and Low Carbon, when Smart Software and V2G Combine. Se não conseguirmos estabelecer contacto com o Conor para já, ele está de volta. Hello, yes. Hello, Conor?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. So sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. It happens.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay, well, let's just get started then. Thanks for the invite today. It's a real pleasure to be here in what's been a super interesting morning. And I think today the focus of what I'm going to talk about is the work that we've been doing with Nissan in the UK, rolling out what is now the world's largest residential vehicle-to-grid program. Before we jump into the details of that program, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we see the decarbonisation challenge and opportunity. I think lots of people have presented really great perspectives today. I just want to give a quick summary of our take before we jump into the work we've been doing with Nissan. So we all know that renewable energy is a I guess, key to decarbonising our economies. And the cost of renewable energy is falling as the cost of the generation hardware is falling rapidly. And this is a really positive trend. But one of the things that we don't talk about so much is that although the cost to produce the electricity is falling, the cost and complexity of integrating it into our system is increasing. So getting to about 30 to 40% renewable penetration is quite straightforward. But beyond that, live balancing of the system, frequency management, and even maintaining our physical inertia on the system become real engineering challenges. It overall has the potential to create a more volatile grid. So in order to bring that to life, we've looked at the conditions in the UK and how they've changed as we've increased our renewable penetration. So what you can see on screen right now are, on the left-hand side, is 2 days from April, one in 2014 and one in 2020. April had historically low demand due to COVID, but we found 2 days that were approximately similar in their characteristics and had essentially the same weather, same solar irradiance, same wind speed. And the chart below that shows the difference in electricity price in those 2 years. So in 2014, the power price was pretty stable at about £40 per megawatt hour. Fast forward to 2020, and although the average price is not that much lower, over half of the periods in the day are negatively priced. So the volatility difference between those 2 days is significant. And really the main differentiation between them is an increase from 25 gigawatts to 47 of increased solar, wind and solar. On the right-hand side of the picture, you can see the wholesale prices throughout the year. And really the key statistic we take away from last year was that in the UK, there were over 300 negatively priced periods when just a few years ago there had never been any. And that creates a real opportunity for technologies that can capture it. So this is the same picture, except we've mapped electricity price to a coloured surface. Again, the aim is to show how from that scenario in 2014, where we had very stable power prices with a few spikes, that we're now moving to a much less predictable, much more volatile electricity system, and we're really only at the start of the journey to decarbonize our grids. And this is just the evolution of grid conditions that we see associated with decarbonizing the power sector. But when you then start to think that in parallel to this, we need to decarbonize transport and heating, ventilation, and cooling, which adds more energy load to the electricity system, and load which is correlated. People want to charge their vehicles at the same time, heat and cool their homes at the same time. We can see the enormity of the challenge that lies ahead of us. And trying to do both of these things in parallel is going to be really difficult unless we connect these new electric loads and manage and optimize when they charge in order to make most efficient use of the overall system. So it's a huge challenge, but a really massive opportunity for technologies that can keep address it. And no technology in our eyes is better placed than vehicle to grid, which can truly unlock the potential of an electric vehicle and its benefits to the grid and the benefits that can offer to drivers and customers. So that was all I wanted to say on sort of context to set the scene and give you our take on the decarbonisation challenge. And with Nissan in the UK, as Frank mentioned, we've been working on Project Sirius, which has now rolled out the world's largest residential vehicle to grid program. So for the last 3 years, with the help of government funding and a really great collection of partners, we've installed 350 vehicle to grid charge points in homes across the UK grid, and I'll show you those in a second in a live demo, and are optimizing their control to meet the needs of the grid and the customer. And I think at this point, it would be remiss of me not to mention the great help we've had from the Nissan UK team, who have been excellent collaborators and doing from all sorts of things, from helping us to design our algorithms so that they maintain the battery warranty while we're operating quite sophisticated algorithms that control when the vehicles charge and discharge. So the V2G offering that we've rolled out through Project Sirius has 3 key components. The first is a customer proposition. This was managed by OVO Energy, where they offered customers 30 pence per kilowatt hour for every unit of electricity that they sold back to the grid. And then the second key component is the charging hardware itself. This is the world's first residential vehicle-to-grid device that's been developed by Indra Renewable Technologies in the UK. And the hardware comes with an associated app that allows the customer to set their preferences and see the behavior of their vehicle as it charges and discharges. And then the last key component is the Kaluza platform. It's where I spend my time working and focusing on, which connects the vehicle to the electricity markets and the customer in a way that enables it to provide a really critical support to the grid. So I'm going to show. I want to spend. I want to show you our platform in action and the live portfolio that we've rolled out today. But just before we do that, I just want to quickly talk about our platform and how it works. This is a high-level illustration of the platform that we've developed and has been used in Project Sirius. On the left-hand side of the picture, you've got the home with a vehicle-to-grid charge point in it. That charge point will communicate with the platform every minute and send us the latest information on whether the vehicle is connected, if it is connected, what its state of charge is, and a whole host of physical parameters. When the platform receives one of those latest data packets, it then looks at the information that we've gathered from the Kaluza developed app, which allows customer to input when they want the vehicle to be ready, minimum and maximum state of charge preferences. And the platform then uses those inputs along with the live telemetry data to basically work out the optimal charging paths using quite sophisticated AI and machine learning based algorithms that optimize against live wholesale prices, any conditions on the network, which mean that there's an opportunity for the charge point to earn money by providing support to the grid. Each of these optimization algorithms runs every minute and is then communicates the latest charging profile back down to the vehicle. So that's a high-level summary of how the program and what we've been developing. To bring it to life, I'm going to show you a live demo of our platform. Just 1 second. So I'm just going to spend the rest of the presentation showing you a live demo of the platform and the vehicle-to-grid portfolio in action. So what you can see in front of you right now is the Kaluza control room. This allows us to monitor the live status of devices on the platform. As I mentioned, each of those devices will send us a telemetry packet every minute. The grey dots that you can see are devices that are currently in an idle state. The blue ones are charging, and the few green dots that you can see are currently pushing electricity back onto the grid. If we zoom in on one particular region of the UK grid, the West Midlands, we reveal further devices. These open circles are EV or V2G charge points where there isn't currently a vehicle connected. And as we're sort of in the middle of the day, there's lots of open circles that will fill up as the evening progresses. The data that we capture from each of the charge points allows us to derive really powerful insights from different levels of aggregation from across the platform. So being able to understand customer plug-in behavior and then track actual consumption and export patterns and map those to electricity price are key to unlocking the full potential of a vehicle-to-grid connected EV. And then at the most granular level, we've got a host of data points on the vehicle itself, the type of connected car. So for all the V2G charge points, that will be a Nissan Leaf. Latest information on state of charge, battery health, and a host of other inputs. And those are all the data points that feed those AI and machine learning algorithms at the heart of the platform that continually re-optimize the optimal charging paths and then decide when a vehicle should charge and discharge throughout the day. A really important part of the challenge that we're solving is not just this grid challenge, but really making sure that we're engaging the customers in ways that are really rewarding and enable them to benefit from participating with this intelligent energy technology. To bring that to life, I'm going to run a simulated grid event that shows the platform's ability to dispatch vehicle-to-grid charge points and EVs with normal smart chargers in real time, and then also some of the benefits flowing to one of the customers. So this page on the left is an OVO Energy V2G live app that allows a customer to monitor the live status of their device and see the benefits they're deriving. Before I run this simulated grid event, I want to point out that although the grid event is simulated, everything else you'll see is real. This is the platform sending real commands to real V2G charge points that are then using those connected Nissan Leafs to push that physical electricity back to the grid. So the alert that has just popped up has signified that there's a shortfall of power in one of the UK's 14 grid supply point regions. If we drill down into the specific details of that alert, we can see that the platform has calculated that there's 54 kilowatts of dispatchable capacity available right now. As we move into the evening, that will increase quite significantly as more vehicles connect. So again, I just want to, before I hit dispatch, just remind you that this is real. What you're seeing will actually be vehicles discharging in the West Midlands of the UK grid. And if you just, before I hit the dispatch button, just draw your attention to the current status, where most vehicles are idle with about 17 EVs charging. When I hit dispatch, you'll see that within just a few seconds, the vehicle-to-grid charge points spring to life and turn green as they start to push that much-needed power back to the grid. And also, the number of EVs that is charging will start to reduce, as those that can reduce without affecting the customer's mobility need doing so. The customer's V2G live page is now updated to show them that they're exporting at 6 kilowatts and earning £1.80 per hour. This is fed by live data from the charge point itself, which is used to update trackers of how much the customer has exported and earned this year. That device level data can also be used to feed through into the customer's balance, showing that this customer, that in the last 30 days, they've offset more than half of their total electricity and gas charges from their vehicle to grid credits. This data from the device can also be used to engage the customer with really interesting insights, showing this customer they're the 9th best V2G performer in the UK because they plug in regularly at peak times, and also providing a nudge towards what they need to do to reach the top 5. So I hope that this demo has proved a useful insight into the power of vehicle to grid and the technology that we're developing, and also show that this is happening today. Often it's talked about in a future context, but we've seen just through this demo the potential of vehicle to grid to really to play a role today, a role that we only see increasing. We're looking to roll out pilots and programs like this in new markets. So if anyone's interested in potentially working together, please get in touch and we'd be delighted to show you more of the platform and talk about how we can work together. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you very much, Conor. We hope this vehicle-to-grid solution is going to be in every home in the near future. I'm looking forward to having it in my home too. It's a long-time dream I have, so hope in the near future it will happen. Well, next, vamos em direto para um dos meus sítios preferidos do planeta, para os Açores, onde está já o Paula Bermonte, que é o Head of Innovation da Eletricidade dos Açores. Olá, Paulo, bom dia. Que novidades é que nos trazes dos Açores? Cuidado com os fones. Não estamos a ouvir, Paulo? Pois estamos com algumas dificuldades no som. Agora sim, parece que já voltou o som.
Ok. Já voltou o som, não?
Já voltou. Bom dia, Paulo.
Ora, viva, muito bom dia. Aqui realmente ainda é bom dia, aí já será boa tarde.
Quase.
Acima de tudo, é verdade. Queria, de facto, dar-vos as boas-vindas aqui ao arquipélago dos Açores.
Paulo, faça-me só um favor, antes de continuar, baixe só o microfone, deve estar a usar o microfone desses auscultadores, que está virado para cima. Está mesmo acoplado aos seus auscultadores. Do outro lado. Isso. Esse microfone está aí agarrado. Exatamente.
Descobri o que é que tinha falhado.
É isso.
Ora bem, dar-vos as boas-vindas aos Açores, aquilo que eu costumo dizer, um paraíso, de certa forma, ainda perdido aqui no centro do Atlântico Norte. Nós somos, por assim dizer, a última fronteira da Europa, a última fronteira ocidental, e somos também um verdadeiro laboratório, se assim se pode chamar, de onde a tecnologia poderá ser objeto de validade e onde acabamos por ser um verdadeiro laboratório de soluções integradas, assentes em práticas e tecnologias pioneiras, como é o caso, neste caso, da mobilidade elétrica, e daí a importância de nós podermos partilhar com toda a gente que nos vai acompanhando nesta excelente iniciativa da Nissan, da mobilidade inteligente. Eu diria que a minha ideia seria dar-vos, de fato, este testemunho, partilhar com vocês aquilo que tem vindo a ser feito aqui nos Açores, em matéria de projeto. Vou procurar tentar ver se consigo controlar aqui os slides. Julgo que sim. A aquisição, no fundo, estamos a falar aqui de um projeto que teve início praticamente no final de 2019, com, uma associação de interesses entre várias tecnológicas, entre as quais a Nissan, obviamente, e que, no fundo, acabou por se constituir aqui como um projeto piloto, diria eu, que é praticamente inovador no nosso país, e não só, e que julgo que tem vindo a ser acompanhado por muito boa gente. A verdade é que a grande expectativa e os grandes objetivos é que se possam vir a obter os tais dados consistentes para, se decidir sobre futuras, diria eu, validações ao nível da expansão e do seu enquadramento enquanto uma oportunidade de negócio que tem vantagens para todos os utilizadores, para os fabricantes e também para nós como operador da rede aqui na região autónoma dos Açores. Afinal de contas, está aqui em causa uma enorme oportunidade de podermos avançar também em matéria de eficiência energética com a eletrificação de consumos energéticos. Ora bem, tudo isso começou, como eu há pouco referi, através de um memorando de entendimento que foi assinado em finais de 2019 e depois, no início de 2020, juntamente com a pandemia, chegaram aqui os primeiros veículos que a EDA adquiriu, diretamente com o objetivo de fazer já a eletrificação de parte da sua frota, independentemente desse projeto, é bom que se diga, e que, no fundo, acabou depois por se constituir como um feliz casamento com as outras tecnológicas. Vieram os sistemas de carregamento, foram sendo instalados no início de 2020 e depois aqui está o resultado, diria eu, final: 10 veículos Nissan, 3 veículos NV, ou sejam, comerciais, com também 7 Nissan Leaf, todos eles ligados a sistemas de carregamento de 10 kW de potência cada um. Na totalidade, portanto, temos aqui uma solução de 100 kW. Os principais dados do projeto, como há pouco referi, nos permitem, porque nós tomamos a iniciativa de garantir do lado da EDA uma monitorização do nosso lado sobre trânsitos de energia. Assim, até praticamente há uma semana atrás, poderemos dizer que temos aqui já um total de energia consumida de cerca de 111 MWh, contra 61,4 MWh de energia injetada, há que levar em linha de conta os quilómetros percorridos em matéria da operação corrente na EDA, cerca de 76 mil quilómetros, e depois transformar esses quilómetros em quilowatts-hora, neste caso em megawatts-hora, ao nível da mobilidade, 11,5, com um state of health médio que, com as medidas que nos foi permitido também ir fazendo, dá um valor de cerca de 93,6%. Aqui apenas uma expressão gráfica dos quilómetros percorridos. É óbvio que as viaturas, enfim, o parque de viaturas V2G tenha, digamos, uma diferente, enfim, componente em função, enfim, das necessidades dos serviços, que tem vindo a verificar-se uma opção cada vez crescente pela utilização dos utilizadores. E talvez aqui, falando um pouco do perfil de utilização, chamado time of use, dos veículos, consegue-se perceber que numa primeira fase do projeto V2G aqui nos Açores se privilegiou aquilo que eu chamaria de load shifting, ou seja, o carregamento dos veículos nas horas de vazio, ou se preferirem de super vazio, normalmente entre as 2 e as 4 da manhã, e depois verifica-se existir aqui um período intermediário que nós denominamos de trip mode, para poder voltar a recarregar, digamos, durante as horas normais de elaboração normal os veículos, e a devolução de energia à rede, se preferirem ao complexo de edifícios onde a nossa frota está ligada, cerca, enfim, entre as 20 e as 22, que representa, por assim dizer, as horas de ponta, enfim, do nosso próprio diagrama da procura de eletricidade. Talvez, passando aqui ao slide seguinte, bem sei que há aqui aspectos que de alguma forma são bastante técnicos, mas a nível de time of use, a partir do final do ano passado, a partir de dezembro de 2020, ensaiamos um perfil diferente. Inicialmente, se lembram, no perfil anterior, nós tínhamos a possibilidade de fazer ainda assim testes de regulação de frequência ao final de semana, quando as viaturas estavam, enfim, imobilizadas, os sábados e ao domingo. Depois, a partir do mês de dezembro, entendemos fazê-las de uma forma praticamente permanente, apenas com aqui o pequeno intervalo para voltarmos a poder carregar as viaturas e novamente num período que fosse um período de vazio. E como podem verificar, em função daquilo que é a variação da frequência da rede, eu quero recordar que nós estamos num ambiente de pequenos sistemas isolados, em que, enfim, diria eu, a variação das características da tensão e da frequência são para nós um desafio permanente para cumprimento das normas vigentes, designadamente a norma 50-160, manter a frequência dentro de valores perfeitamente aceitáveis e normalizados, em termos de qualidade da energia entregue aos nossos clientes. E aqui se verifica, de facto, foi este o perfil, no fundo, se quiserem seguir aqui o modelo da evolução do estado da carga durante um período de uma semana, verifica-se claramente aquilo que eu estava a referir. Durante os dias úteis da semana há ainda aqui um período em que, evidentemente, temos que voltar a carregar os veículos para, no dia seguinte, poderem ser utilizados pelas diferentes áreas, estruturas aqui operacionais da EDA, da Eletricidade dos Açores. Depois, no final de semana, enfim, vai havendo aqui um decremento da carga das baterias, evidentemente tudo controlado através da plataforma de gestão de energia, que neste caso é do nosso parceiro tecnológico, que é a Nuve Corporation, e o resultado que aqui está também nos obrigou a um cuidado, diria eu, um cuidado especial de monitorização da qualidade da onda de tensão. Como podem ver, estas são as características da nossa onda de tensão típica aqui no caso concreto da Ilha de São Miguel, da frequência também, e os histogramas falam também um pouco por si daquilo que tem sido o nosso controle. Depois fazemos também o controle daquilo que são outras das características importantes ter em linha de conta, e podemos dizer com satisfação que a taxa total de distorção harmónica, que é uma das características importantes, enfim, que dá valor ou não à qualidade da energia que nós entregamos na rede e que é consumida pelos nossos clientes, bem como o equilíbrio entre fases, conforme também está aqui representado em gráfico. Eu queria chamar a atenção para este slide, onde nós encontramos aqui um dia em que, ainda anterior à regulação de frequência em permanência, em que fazíamos aqui um mix de load shifting e de regulação de frequência, e onde é possível ver que em determinadas horas do dia, isto é, quando o sistema de 10 veículos, 10 baterias de 40 kWh, 10 carregadores de 10 kW cada um, se ocupavam de devolver energia ao nosso complexo de edifícios aqui em Ponta Delgada, em que, para além de darem conta do recado durante um período de tempo, o período de entrega de energia à rede, da alimentação, das necessidades de consumo de eletricidade de todos os complexos de edifício, ainda sobrou sempre alguma coisa que foi entregue na rede. É aqui uma espécie de veículo to grid, veículo to home, neste caso entendendo que o home como sendo o nosso complexo de edifícios, enfim, da sede da EDA, Eletricidade dos Açores. É de facto um gráfico que fala um pouco daquilo que acaba por ser a realidade de uma alternativa e de um modelo, de um exemplo do billing que pode aqui estar por detrás desse tipo de iniciativas disruptivas da mobilidade elétrica. Queria também chamar a atenção aqui para este aspecto. Eu entendi trazer este slide não com o detalhe, enfim, no eixo do tempo, porque nós, é bom dizer-se, nesse projeto já identificamos que há aqui uma margem de evolução e se calhar termos uma segunda oportunidade para avançarmos com um novo piloto para uma segunda fase, em que a plataforma de gestão, que dá a ordem da evolução e, portanto, do power requested versus o power provided, em função da variação de frequência. Se olharem com atenção nestes gráficos, eles têm uma verdadeira similitude. Diria que a variação da potência ativa que é entregue na rede e consumida pelos diferentes carregadores, ou seja, no fundo, mediante a utilização da bateria dos veículos, a verdade é que é um espelho daquilo que é a variação da frequência. Esta é uma das provas de conceito mais importantes que entendemos decisivas para que o regulador, a Direção-Geral de Energia, as autoridades regionais, a Direção Regional de Energia, possam de facto validar, analisar as opções futuras sobre esta verdadeira oportunidade de negócio que a tecnologia nos permite ter. Ainda com a vantagem de, ainda há pouco falávamos e ouvíamos, no meu caso concreto, os problemas da autonomia das baterias, que naturalmente aqui nas Ilhas dos Açores é algo que praticamente não se coloca. Temos para já essa vantagem. Além de outra, falou-se muito, enfim, da descarbonização e da redução do consumo de combustíveis fósseis. Ora, nós aqui nos Açores já temos um mix que ultrapassa na totalidade dos Açores cerca de 40% de produção renovável, sendo mais de 60% desse total de energia renovável obtido à custa daquilo que é o nosso petróleo verde nos Açores. Falo da energia geotérmica, que é muito importante não esquecer, é uma realidade que não é exclusiva do arquipélago, mas que é de facto uma tecnologia que nós já dominamos bastante e temos neste momento 3 centrais geotérmicas que se encarregam de garantir o crescimento da produção renovável. Tudo isto, se adicionarmos os nossos novos projetos disruptivos que passam pela construção de sistemas de armazenamento enfim, robustos, neste caso centralizados. Eu diria que uma associação devidamente explorada e trabalhada entre essas soluções de armazenamento centralizado versus o armazenamento descentralizado numa ótica de veículo to grid ou veículo to home, será sempre uma solução que eu chamaria de futuro. No fundo, estamos em presença de uma realidade, já não é só um sonho, que está a ter lugar aqui neste palco, muito interessante. Nós somos um laboratório natural para testar, por exemplo, a eletrónica de potência. É preciso não esquecer que a salinidade nos Açores nada tem a ver com as piores condições que podem acontecer no continente, propriamente dito. Isso misturado com a umidade faz, no fundo, acaba por se constituir, enfim, como um verdadeiro desafio para, enfim, os construtores, sobretudo ao nível da eletrónica de potência. São essas as cautelas e os cuidados que temos em outros quadrantes da nossa atividade corrente de produção, transporte e distribuição de energia elétrica. É este também um pouco o desafio que as tecnológicas poderão testar em modo real no arquipélago dos Açores. Serão certamente todos bem-vindos, e eu apenas queria terminar esta minha apresentação fazendo aqui uma declaração de interesses quase em forma ou em jeito de provocação saudável, que é o de, enfim, dizer e de forma muito convicta de que a eletricidade faz melhor tudo o que de bom já foi inventado antes. Muito obrigado pela vossa atenção, fico disponível para qualquer questão que entendam por bem colocar.
Muito obrigado nós, Paulo, e as questões vão chegar, isto tem estado a chegar através da nossa plataforma online. Não sei se o Paulo teve alguma coisa a ver com isso, mas durante a sua apresentação recebi a confirmação de que vou ter que ir aos Açores no dia 1 de maio, portanto, obrigado pelo convite, lá estarei.
Terei muito gosto em que nós possamos receber, se for a Ponta Delgada, poderá vir a visitar o nosso parque que mostrei, enfim, com a ligação.
Espero ter tempo para isso. Guarda um Nissan Leaf para mim, Paulo. Guarda um Nissan Leaf para mim.
À vontade, vamos dar uma volta e, como se costuma dizer, um bom engenheiro eletrotécnico com alguma experiência na área das redes conhece aqueles sítios todos que só mesmo as vassouras velhas conhecem nos cantos da nossa casa.
Acredito que sim. Fico muito ansioso por isso, então. Vamos então às perguntas. Okay. Temos aqui perguntas para todos. Comecemos pelo Ponz. E a primeira pergunta diz... entretanto, perdemos a ligação com o Ponz, ou não? Are you there, Ponz? Because we lost the picture. Se calhar avançamos para o Frank e já tentamos recuperar o Ponz. Frank, on your view, why is it taking so long to have proper legislation to foster the transition to EVs? European Union seems to be pushing so hard on the automotive sector, but not moving forward with proper legislation. What can you tell us about this, Frank?
Sure. Simplistically, there are an awful lot of people in the decision process. Mm-hmm. So we have electricity market reform, we have the grid owners, we have, in this country, the UK national grid as the main backbone to the power network. We have all the different OEMs, essentially. And we know that governments work in cycles, 2 or 3 years generally. And so we're part of that infrastructure. So for me, it's inevitable that it takes 2 or 3 years. But V2G, for me, is an imperative. It's an inevitable part of the solution. The big question, as you point or you ask, is how quickly can we do it? My perception is that by April 2023 in the UK, we'll have an optimized position, and every month between now and April 2023, the position will improve.
Okay, there's a question either for Frank or Conor, or you can both answer it. And the question is vehicle-to-grid compatible with vehicle-to-home technology? Will we be able to flick a switch at home and choose what we want to do? That's a very good question. Which one of you wants to start? Conor? We're not listening again, Conor. We lost your sound.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's on now.
So sorry, I don't know what's happening. Anyway, we won't get hung up on it. So I think vehicle to home is very much if you can do vehicle to grid, there are just one or two small elements more you need to do vehicle to home. I think the way we look at it is, well, if you have a vehicle to grid charge point, or a charge point that's capable of doing either, then why would you not want to sell energy back to the grid if it's more valuable on a given day than just storing it up for your home when you may not need it? So I think there's probably a combination of both, but I think we very much believe that as the energy system evolves and the value of local energy increases, that sharing your energy with your neighbours at time of need through vehicle to grid is the way to go.
Yeah, maybe if you have like the home battery, once it's filled, it can then move on to the grid. Is that the way it's going to happen? Like do that automatically? Do you get me?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's then you've got a home battery, an electric vehicle, potentially some new connected HVAC system, either for heating or cooling, depending on where you are. All of these things need to be pulled together, and the right solution maybe at some times to use your vehicle to power your home, but at other times there may be great benefits to using that energy for the grid as well.
Frank, do you want to add something on this question, or should I move on?
Well, the only thing I would say is that there's been a debate whether if you have vehicle to grid and your EV outside your house, do you need static battery? I think the two are very complementary. As Conor says, when you have electric heating as well, and with solar, this opens up the possibility of you running your vehicle off the sun's power and being self-sustainable at home. It's very compelling.
Há aqui uma pergunta também para o Paulo, e a pergunta é: o vosso projeto está a ser utilizado pelas entidades reguladoras para permitir estabelecer as bases da legislação Vehicle to Grid em Portugal? Podemos esperar ter essa legislação pronta em breve?
Sim, esse projeto teve logo à nascença essa condição, essa condicionante ou esse requisito, que foi o de juntar à mesma mesa entidades como a ERSE, Entidade Reguladora dos Serviços Energéticos, a própria Direção-Geral de Energia e Geologia, as autoridades regionais que superintendem nesta área. O objetivo é exatamente, e a grande expectativa, que julgo que tem vindo a serem validadas positivamente, é de avaliarem todas essas entidades o modelo de como é que se pode regular um negócio. Isto anda um pouco em torno também da questão que colocaram agora anterior, o que é que se poderá vir a considerar como justa uma remuneração, digamos, de uma atividade com estas características, sabendo, como se sabe, no caso concreto do nosso diagrama de cargas, que o fato de podermos fazer load shifting, isto é, carregar as baterias só num determinado período, diria eu, da noite, ou do vazio, do super vazio, podermos com isso até evitar algum cartelamento que atualmente temos de fazer para a produção renovável, nomeadamente a produção eólica e certamente a médio e longo prazo a produção fotovoltaica, embora aqui, como referi, seja a geotermia, digamos, a nossa principal fonte de produção renovável. Portanto, a resposta é essa, é afirmativa. Temos tido a participação destas entidades nas nossas reuniões de ponto de situação e também temos uma parceria tecnológica que está a trabalhar no modelo para poder simular um conjunto de cenários tipificadamente, que podem ocorrer numa rede isolada, como é o caso das redes das nossas ilhas, para que, possamos afastar qualquer problema relacionado com a permanência dos próprios carregadores em caso de incidentes em redes, com a fragilidade que são as redes em sistemas isolados. Portanto, a resposta é claramente afirmativa. Estamos com muitas expectativas relativamente a essa questão, até porque disso depende, digamos, o crescimento exponencial, como nós esperamos, de uma decisão e de uma opção por parte dos nossos clientes e das nossas empresas, as rent-a-car, as empresas muito vocacionadas aqui para o setor turístico, em virem a optar e enverdar claramente por estas soluções de V2G.
As perguntas continuam a chegar, fiquem descansados, todos os que não virem a sua pergunta colocada aqui, elas vão ser respondidas através de e-mail, nenhuma ficará sem resposta. Uma pergunta também para o Frank Oldfield, e a pergunta é: a implementação plena do Vehicle to Grid depende mais do setor privado ou do setor público? Esperamos pela tradução. Podia ter feito em inglês, mas esqueci.
Certainly in the UK, the public sector has a responsibility to support local businesses, local infrastructure. So I think that we will see the public sector move at scale first. I'm talking obviously in public sector and business to business sense. I think from what you have seen from Conor and Ovo, residential will be very compelling early in the story, but from a commercial entity or public sector environment, for me it's local government, it's health authorities, municipal operations. I see when they're back to base vehicles being able to go back to depots at the end of the working day to capture that key peak time for energy, which in the UK is 4:30 to about 8 o'clock in the evening.
One very curious question here for Conor. UK has much less solar hours than Portugal. How do you see the advantages of vehicle to grid European southern countries compared to your experience at the United Kingdom?
So I think, the characteristics of different countries and their grid changes. Here we've got lots of wind and some solar, whereas in Portugal you may have lots more solar. I think the application of the technology is still equally an equally great opportunity in both. I think it's when you've developed something that works for the customer and then is capable of connecting their vehicle to the grid in a way that intelligently uses that solar when it's abundant, and then when the sun goes down in the evening is using the cars to discharge. I think the way it operates will be different, but I don't see any reason why the potential of the technology is any different in either country.
Okay, thank you, Conor.
It's equally exciting in both.
Yeah, we are running out of time. I thank you all. Obrigado a todos por terem estado connosco neste Fórum da Mobilidade Inteligente da Nissan.